You've been to a comedy club, maybe once, maybe for somebody's birthday, maybe because a coworker said they were doing stand-up now, and you couldn't figure out a polite way to say no. And you remember the routine. You paid 20-something for a ticket. You got put at a table roughly the size of a dinner plate, with two strangers, close enough to smell their cologne. And before the lights went down, a server leaned in and said the sentence that every comedy club in America says, "Just so you know, there's a 2-item minimum." And you thought, sure, fine, I'll get 2 beers. That sentence is the business, not the headliner, not the jokes. That one sentence is the entire financial model, and almost nobody in the room understands what just happened to them. I've spent about 15 years pulling apart the books of small, weird, unglamorous businesses. Car washes, laundromats, bowling alleys. And over that time, a surprising number of people have told me they want to buy a comedy club because it looks like the most fun business on earth. You hang out, you drink free, you know all the comics, and people pay you to laugh. So let me show you what's actually on the other side of that. Because once you see the real math, you'll never look at a 2-drink minimum the same way again. Here's the thesis, and everything else in this video hangs off it. A comedy club is not in the entertainment business. A comedy club is a bar with a metronome. That's it. The show isn't the product. The show is a timing device. It's a machine that takes 150 strangers, sits them in a dark room, and holds them there reliably, predictably, for about 90 minutes. And during those 90 minutes, they can't look at their phones, they can't leave, and there is nothing to do with their hands except drink. A regular bar has no idea how long you're staying. You might nurse one IPA for 2 hours. A comedy club knows exactly how long you're staying, because they wrote the schedule. That's the trick. The comedy is the crowd delivery mechanism. The bar is the business. And once you see it that way, every single strange thing about comedy clubs starts making sense. The tiny tables that so servers can reach you. The 2-item minimum that's a revenue floor. The 7 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. shows that's not scheduling, that's inventory turns. You're not a customer. You're a seat hour. Let me tell you about Denise. Denise Kowalski runs a 180-seat club in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I met her at a small business conference in 2019 where I was doing a panel nobody attended, and she was in the back row on her phone, which I respected. A couple years later, she let me sit in her back office on a Saturday night and go through her numbers, which almost no owner will do. And before she opened anything, she said, "The ticket money isn't my money. It belongs to the comics, the landlord, and the credit card processor. Whatever the bar does, that's the only part I keep." And when she pulled up the P and L, she was basically right. And the shape of it is typical across the industry. Tickets and food and beverage each land somewhere around 40 to 50% of gross revenue, and everything else, private bookings, a merch cut, is gravy. Some breakdowns put food and beverage as high as 70% for a healthy club. But revenue isn't the point. Margin is the point. A ticket has almost no margin because the ticket exists to pay the talent. The bar has margins that would make a software founder blush. Which brings me to Marcus. Marcus Ferrante managed the bar at a club outside Philadelphia for 9 years, and he is the most cold-blooded person I've ever talked to about beer. I asked him once what his favorite drink to sell was. He didn't say a beer. He didn't say a cocktail. He said, and I'm quoting, vodka soda, because it's basically vodka and free. Ooh. Let me put actual numbers on that. The industry math looks like this. A domestic beer costs the club around $1.50 and sells for 7 gross margin north of 75%. A cocktail with $2 of liquor in it sells for 14. Across the board, alcohol in a live venue runs 75 to 80% gross margin. Now compare that to food. Food is a nightmare. Food has a kitchen, a cook, a health inspector, spoilage, and a fraction of the margin. Which is why comedy club food is famously, aggressively mediocre. That's not laziness. That's strategy. The nachos exist to satisfy a 2-item minimum for the one guy at the table who isn't drinking. They are not there to be good. Marcus told me the goal was never sell 2 drinks. The minimum is a floor, not a target. The target is average spend per customer, and a well-run club wants that around $55 to $65 a head, all in. So run a sold-out 150-seat room, $25 ticket, $25 a head at the bar. That's about $7,500 from one show. And there are 2 shows Friday and 2 Saturday. Sounds incredible, right? Yeah. Let's talk about where it all goes. The people on stage are paid on a ladder so steep it looks like a typo. I learned this from Ray Ostrowski, who booked rooms in Cleveland for 2 decades and taught me more about labor economics in one dinner than most textbooks. Ray broke a show into 3 jobs. The host warms up the crowd, does 10 minutes, reads the drink specials. Ray called them the referee, range roughly $25 to $100 a show. The feature, the middle act, 15 to 25 minutes, usually $75 to $300, depending on the city. And the headliner, the closer, 45 minutes or more. A club running a 3 or 4 night headliner has historically paid somewhere around $800 to $1,200 for the whole weekend, plus a hotel or a club-owned condo. Now stop and do that math. 3 performers, a full weekend, and the talent bill might be under $2,000. Meanwhile, the room grossed maybe $30,000. And this is the part that made me sit back. Ray said the club isn't buying jokes, it's buying draw. He had a phrase for comics who were genuinely funny, but couldn't sell a ticket on their own name. He called them just funnies. Great on stage, worth nothing at the box office. Clubs book them as loss leaders, betting they'll be worth something in 3 years. Which means a comedy club is closer to a farm system than a theater. You underpay talent early, and what you're really buying is the option on who they become. And I want you to hold on to that idea, because in a few minutes I'm going to show you how that entire system broke. Because here's the flip side of that ladder. The moment a comic actually has a draw, the leverage inverts violently. A touring headliner with a real audience doesn't take $800. They take a guarantee, or a percentage. And at that level, a touring headliner can take 50 to 60% of ticket revenue off the top. Some take a cut of merch. Some negotiate over the drink minimum. Here's the scenario that keeps owners up at night. A club books a name. The guarantee is $10,000 for the weekend. That comic sells 150 tickets. Do the math. You just paid $10,000 in talent to sell about $4,000 of tickets. And now you are praying, genuinely praying that those 150 people drink like it's the last night on earth, because the bar is the only thing between you and a 5-figure hole in one weekend. That's why smart operators tie guarantees to ticket thresholds. That's why bookers obsess over a comic's email list and their Instagram numbers more than their act. The booker isn't asking, is this person funny? The booker is asking, how many humans will this person physically move into my room on a Thursday? Funny is table stakes. Draw is the asset. Okay, Vic Salgado spent about 1.5 years trying to open a club near Tampa, and I had a front row seat because he called me every 3 weeks in a state of escalating disbelief. Vic did what a lot of first-timers do. Found the space, signed the lease, started the build-out, then applied for the liquor license. Wrong order. Catastrophically wrong order. Here's the trap. A commercial build-out for a venue like this runs 90 to 120 days. A liquor license can take anywhere from 45 to 180 days depending on your state and whether anybody files a protest. Your lease, though? Your lease starts the day you sign. So you end up with a finished, beautiful, room stage sound system, $3,000 of glassware that you are legally not allowed to open, and you're paying rent on it every single day. At the rents these places carry, call it $5,000 to $20,000 a month, and $10,000 to $30,000 in a major city. A 60-day license delay can incinerate $30,000 before you sell one ticket. And in some places, it's worse. In quota states, New Jersey is famous for this. There is no application. There's no line to stand in. The only way to get a license is to buy one from somebody who already has one. On a secondary market where transfers run well into six figures. Vic got his license. Eventually. He also burned most of his working capital getting it. A small room might start at $50,000 to $250,000, but a real 200-seat venue with a proper build-out and a full bar runs $500,000 and up. He told me something I've repeated 100 times since. I thought I was buying a comedy club. I was buying a construction project with a punchline at the end. Now here's a question almost nobody asks. What is a comedy club doing on a Tuesday? Because a club makes nearly all of its money in a narrow window Friday and Saturday, maybe Thursday, 4 to 6 shows a week. The rent is charged for all 7 days. So is the insurance. So is the loan. You have a physical asset sitting dark 5 nights a week. Priya Raghunathan runs a room in Chicago, and she's the sharpest operator I know on this problem. I asked what her most profitable night was. She said Tuesday. I laughed. She did not. Priya's Tuesday is a corporate buyout. A software company's regional sales team rents the whole room. Private rentals like that run roughly $1,500 to $5,000. And here's the beautiful part. The space is already built, the staff is already scheduled, and the bar is running an open tab with zero price sensitivity because it's on the company card. She told me corporate nights have the cleanest margin in her business. No marketing spend, no draw risk, no comps, just a room and a tab. And that reframes the whole asset. A comedy club isn't a club that occasionally hosts events. It's an event venue that runs comedy on weekends to build a brand and stay culturally relevant so it can charge corporate rates the rest of the week. Same building, 2 completely different businesses. I have to talk about the dark side of this model because it's real and it's everywhere and it explains a lot of bad comedy. Eddie Lamb produced shows in Sacramento for years, and he walked me through what's called a bringer show. The deal is simple. A comic gets stage time. In exchange, they have to bring a certain number of paying audience members. 3, 5, sometimes 8. Think about what that is, financially. The club has outsourced its marketing department to unpaid labor. The performer is now the ticket seller, the promoter, and the product, and they're paying for it with their own social capital because those 5 people in the seats are their coworkers and their cousin. Eddie's point was sharp. A bringer show doesn't select for the funniest comic, it selects for the comic with the most friends. Run enough of them, and you get a room full of people who don't like comedy, watching someone who isn't ready in a club that has trained its own audience never to come back. It eats its own supply chain. It works on a spreadsheet, and it's poison long term. And it explains something a lot of people have noticed, why the average comedy show in a mid-sized city has gotten noticeably worse, while the top of the market has gotten better than ever. Which brings me to the part I actually find fascinating, because the machine I've been describing to you was built in about 1985, and it has been quietly falling apart. 3 things happened at once. First, the discovery layer moved. It used to be that the only way to build an audience was to grind the club circuit for a decade, and the clubs were the gatekeepers. Now a comic posts crowd work clips on TikTok and builds a mailing list of 40,000 people in 18 months. The club is no longer the gate, it's just a room. Second, and this is the killer, those comics skip the clubs entirely. Industry executives keep flagging that there are far more comedians now capable of selling 1,000, 500 to 3,000 tickets per city than there were a few years ago. And those performers have moved out of clubs and into theaters. The farm system trains the players, and the players go straight to the majors without ever paying back the club that developed them. Third, audiences drink less. And that one is existential, because as I've been saying for 15 minutes, the bar was the business. When per head alcohol spend drops, the whole cross-subsidy collapses. So clubs are adapting. Some are going the other way, entirely higher ticket prices, no drink minimum, because it turns out people would rather pay $45 up front than $25 plus a mandatory tab. It's transparent, and the accounting is cleaner. Some record every show and put it on YouTube as a marketing channel instead of treating streaming as the enemy. Some host podcasts. And a lot have leaned into local nights because a showcase that costs $400 in talent and sells 120 tickets is a far better contribution margin than a touring headliner taking 60% of the door. Meanwhile, the market underneath all this isn't shrinking. Depending on which research firm you believe, the global comedy club market has been running somewhere in the $4 to $8 billion range and growing around 6% a year, with North America the biggest slice and well over 2,000 dedicated venues in the US alone. Demand is fine. It's the operating model that's cracking. So let me give you the punchline, and it's got nothing to do with comedy. In late 2022, Caroline's on Broadway, one of the most famous comedy clubs in the country, 30 years in Times Square, closed. Not because it wasn't funny. The owner said the 10-year lease was up for a rent reset, and the landlord figured they could get more for the space. 30 years of brand equity ended by a lease renewal. Now compare that to the Comedy Cellar in Greenwich Village. Sold out basically every night since it reopened after the pandemic. Chappelle drops in unannounced. It's the most valuable brand in American stand-up. And here's the detail that tells you everything. The owner owns the building. He also owns the restaurant upstairs, which shares a kitchen, a menu, and staff with the club. And he bought a second basement around the corner in 2000 and turned it into a 200-seat room. That's not a comedy story. That's a real estate story with a stage in it. So when people ask me if they should buy a comedy club, my honest answer is, you're not evaluating a comedy club. You're evaluating three separate things stacked on top of each other. A beverage business with 75% margins. A real estate position you probably don't control, and a talent pipeline that has structurally stopped paying you back. A well-run club nets maybe 10 to 20%. A smaller room might clear 50 grand a year for an owner who's there 6 nights a week. A big, established one can push past 300. Those are real numbers. They are not life-changing money for the amount of work involved. But the reason people do it anyway doesn't show up on any spreadsheet. The night I went through Denise's books after we'd added up every ugly line item she told me about a comic who came through her room in 2016 that nobody had heard of. She paid him $150. He sells out arenas now, and he still texts her. She said, "That's not on the P&L, but that's why I'm still here." And look, I'm a numbers guy. I've spent my whole career telling people to ignore the story and read the statement. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't understand her completely. So the next time a server leans over your tiny table and says 2-item minimum, you'll know exactly what's happening. You're not buying a beer. You're funding a talent development program, subsidizing a landlord, and paying for the option that the person on stage becomes somebody. Enjoy the show. Tip your server. If this changed how you look at a business you thought you understood, subscribe. That's the entire point of this channel. And drop a comment with the business you want me to break down next. I read everyone, and honestly, half my best episodes came out of that comment section. See you in the next one.